provided as is required by Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, with respect to the Home News Tribune to publish the same. This announcement must be entered into the minutes of this meeting. And for those attending today, please be aware that the board meetings are recorded via audio. Roll call?
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Here.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin? Here.
Adoption of the minutes of February 3rd.
I move
Public meeting.
we adopt the minutes of the February 3rd.
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
Chairman Engel?
Yes, to adopt.
Commissioner Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
I should say here instead of yes, because I did that. Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Old business, none. New business, general election review.
Commissioner, I've kind of been mentioned before if you want me to introduce some of the new employees.
Oh,
before
I'm
we get
sorry.
to the
It's a good time to do
meeting.
it.
So, and again, just for your indulgence, so commissioners, with the last time we met, we brought some new employees before the board that had filled some recently retired or people who left were elections. I did want to introduce some people who had recently been hired and joined the board. Some had been working for a couple of months, you may already know, but again, the first person I want to introduce is Harry Sood, who's been was a seasonal at the Board of Elections. We liked him so much, we said, why don't you stick around? He's been a great asset to the board and our first South Asian, also one of our multilingual speakers at the board. So he's been a great addition, and it's been great to know him, and thank you, Harry, for second person I want to introduce is Jolene Marcus. Again, someone that was a seasonal over here at the college when we split offices. And again, everyone who thought so well of her, including some of our former clerks that were retired, suggested, matter of fact, demanded that we bring her on board. So we have, and again, she's our first person from Helmetta for elections.
Which two?
So again, she's been a great asset, and we welcome her aboard.
Thank you.
And the last person I want to introduce would be someone that was just recently approved by will be approved by the county freeholders tonight, but Ryan Coyle, who's currently seasonal for the election. Okay.
Yay!
All three are at
Yeah, all three are at the main office. What's that? Well, Shane got introduced the last one.
Did you?
Yeah, they weren't here. And then lastly, Steve, do you want to do introductions for our new employees over the warehouse?
Okay, I brought two of my new employees. We'll have Jenny Rowdy stand up first. Okay. So that's Jenny Rowdy. She just started with us actually the beginning of last month, and then the beginning of January, the beginning of the year. That's Madison. And I absolutely appreciate you guys voting them on. They're wonderful, and I'm very happy to have them.
Thank you, Steve. We're looking forward to working with you. Old business, none. New business, general election review. Is first on the list.
Do you want the commissioners begin?
I can start off with something. There were many, many problems with this past election, and a good chunk of it relates to poll locations and change of poll locations, staffing, and equipment. I gave the commissioners and the administrator had a couple of copies, a few selections from Title 19 election law, which really lays it out. The County Board of Elections is the only one, or the only people that can change the locations of polling places and eliminate the polling locations. That did not happen in November. There were two polling locations in Spotswood that I obviously learned about later that were eliminated, and we never voted for that. All right? And the change, I don't know if there are any other changes. I haven't gotten into that. I was aware of the Spotswood ones. That is something that is solely the right of the board, not the administration, not the administrator, not in general, it's the Board of Elections. Not only didn't we vote on it, we didn't know about the change. We weren't advised about the change. Similarly, in terms of equipment and a number of, and the staffing of poll clerks at the locations, I learned by accident before the election, but too late to have any changed, of what I have to, I personally have to say was bizarre staffing. The staffing as presented was 10 poll clerks per polling location, regardless of whether there was one election district in that polling location or 6 election districts in that polling location. It had no sense of reality.
Is this the regular election?
That was the regular election in
Not
November.
early.
No, not early. That was the regular election in November. And you'll see from what I provided, it says that district boards in each election district consist of 4 members, and if it's more than a certain number, it's 6. So the number of poll clerks is set in the law, and it's based on per election district, not location. And if there is going to be any changes, which is not provided by law, and even if you talk to the AG, then it would certainly only be the discretion of the board of commissioners to make that decision, not the administrator. All right? That is not something that we did. That is not something that we approved. And I only found out about this because a poll clerk coordinator complained to me right before the election, and I raised it, but at that point it was really too late because the number of machines that were sent out and the rest of the stuff was already sent out. It's not acceptable. And the number of machines is another issue. It's you'll see from the form, the quote, it talks about the number of machines which shall be used per election district. Shall be used, not may be used, shall be used. That was not what was done in this election, all right? And we had much fewer machines than is required by law. The changes that were made were not approved by the Board of Elections, the commissioners, and they were not even notified. At least I was not notified. That's unacceptable, and we have to follow what the law is. All of this resulted in at least 2 or 3 different towns that I know of that directly, lines that ended up 2 and 2.5. Voters had to wait in some towns 2 or 2.5 hours to vote. 2 to 2.5 hours to vote, even though the general turnout for a gubernatorial election statewide was essentially the same for the last 3 elections, 39%, 40%, 41%. This was not a big surge that people had to wait 2.5 hours, and a lot of people left. All of this is unacceptable. From now on, and it should have been before, any polling place change, any polling place elimination must, and that's what the law says, must be determined solely by the Board of Elections, number 1. Number 2, the number of poll clerks and the number of machines should be followed by what's in the law, not what was done. It's not acceptable to have a situation set up where we had voters waiting 2.5 hours and people left because of the timing. None of that's acceptable. It's not good. We did not comply with what the law was in November, and we have to do that. And I'll talk about something else later. But there are many other issues in here, but the baseline issue for this election and the biggest number of problems were because of what I just discussed.
Not the fact that everything was down.
That was
a major factor as well.
That was another issue.
And I don't know if you. Let me just finish my
Yeah.
sentence very quick. I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't.
Go ahead.
May I respond?
Nope.
Just as you were speaking, of course, I noticed my own issues in this communities to which I did visit, but it was mainly because nothing started working at the time that it was supposed to start working. That was not, we couldn't handle that part of it. I understand, I've heard many concerns about the numbers of machines at the voting places, but the major weight, I believe, is that nothing could begin on time.
May I just respond to
Go ahead.
that? That's another issue And I think that was caused because we as a board,
Yeah.
and the state, all the election officials in the state were forced to do early voting, even though the state legislatures and the governor were said we didn't have enough time, which resulted in untested equipment, which resulted in the problems in the morning and a number of things with the routers, et cetera. I agree, that was a problem in the morning, and it was ultimately resolved by 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock? 10 or 11
Really,
o'clock.
Darryl?
Yes, so the 2.5-hour waits were, there were some early waits, but that was taken care of, people left. They came back. The waits were there, the lengthy waits were there because of the number of the polling locations, the staffing, and the equipment issues. We had issues, the other issue is an absolutely legitimate issue, and it shouldn't have happened, but that's not what resulted in the lengthy waits.
Just one last comment, Madam
Okay.
Chair. I would just have hoped that you had been more complete. That's why I brought up the situation. The biggest issue for me were persons who came to the booths and could not vote and couldn't come back later. Missing an opportunity to vote, as I'm sure you've heard me say, is horrendous. I don't know if there was any consideration what can be done about something like that. Should there ever be a technical problem again? But not being allowed to vote and have that vote count when you go out of your way to get there early in the morning and show your voice or hear your voice was a big issue for me.
If I may.
As a naturalized
I mentioned the things that I said. They are not exhaustive. I said there are many other issues, and
Okay.
this is absolutely correct. There should have been paper provisional ballots in the polls as provided for, and that weren't there, so the provisional ballots are basically intended to be a fail-safe. The fail-safe paper ballots were not there. That's another problem. That's something that must be corrected as well. But I was trying to go over the big picture. There are many, as I said, there are many items. Okay.
Go ahead, Tom, I requested ES&S. Is there a representative here?
There is not.
There's not. And I also requested the county clerk.
There is not a representative of the county
Not
clerk.
even the deputy?
Not even the deputy.
Some of these, I mean, the machines, why they didn't work, the e-books, why they didn't work, that's ES&S, and they need to explain to us why.
Well, if you want me to go
I
ahead.
waited in Edison High for 45 minutes to vote because the e-books weren't working.
Wow.
Would you like me to go into some of these topics?
Before you do, I'm gonna amplify what Sylvia said. We've asked for ES&S and the county clerk to come here, and we knew when this meeting was and when we were going to do it for at least a month. All right?
Longer than that.
Well, I know, we postponed it for a number of reasons, and we thought it would be better in person. But we asked this for at least this month. In the meantime, the county commissioners decided to set up a group to review elections. The county clerk and the deputy county clerk showed up at that meeting. ES&S sent 2 people, even though the date of that meeting was switched by a day or 2 days, and they showed up anyway, notwithstanding that we requested this for a month before. That's not acceptable.
Correct.
And perhaps coincidentally, that was not a public meeting. Those are not public meetings. This is a public meeting.
Can I say something?
Commissioner Benjamin?
I was able to attend one of those meetings yesterday. I was not at the first meeting. Sylvia was there. But I didn't hear any answer, and the question brought up about provisional ballots and why the towns did not have provisional ballots. There's no answers given so far.
Or provisional ballots behind the machine.
One other issue is you cannot get through to our office or through the warehouse. The poll workers, if there was a problem, you could not get through. And then they put them on hold, and you couldn't get through anyway. Other poll workers couldn't get through. Something has to be done about the phone system.
Tom may go over that, but my general impression was the part of the problem in terms of the overload of phone calls this election was because all of the other problems, the issues with the routers, which affected many of our polling locations, I don't know the numbers, so we had all the poll clerks calling for those things, so it was an overload. I don't know in terms of our elections probably pre-2000, because 2000 was the paper ballots, whether whether we were adequately staffed in terms of phones or not. So it's something we definitely should consider, because that's another thing that was not acceptable in the last election, but the issue is whether that was because of the other problems, and if those other problems are resolved, whether we need to resolve, whether it's a problem.
In case, right, something else that
Yes.
we have not considered comes
Yes.
up like that one.
Yes.
It's purely technical
Yeah.
and out of our hands, actually.
Any further comments from commissioners?
Tom, you want, yeah, Tom.
Tom, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just expand on a couple of comments and review and add some context. So, again, for us, we did have those 2 meetings with the county, which was a couple of different departments, county IT, marketing, government affairs, and so on, to kind of work through some of the logistical items and problems that occurred during the election. So, and again, I might touch upon some of the things that Commissioner Katz said, but I'll just go through. So first and foremost, as I can say, is that the poll books as laid out and intended worked as intended. The issue that Middlesex County encountered, as well as other counties, was related to the routers provided by the state and used by Middlesex County in coordination with those poll books. The connectivity testing done prior to that was not on site, or a truck or an on-site connectivity test conducted by the vendor of the state. It was more of a desktop exercise. So again, that doesn't account for buildings that might be like high schools or gymnasiums that have maybe within that building a little bit more difficult Wi-Fi connection. So to begin the day, the difficulty the poll workers were encountering was the connectivity of trying to get a signal into a location for the poll books to be able to do the initial upload of all the changes from early voting and the days prior in terms of mail-in ballots. So that was the issue that was poll workers were encountering. That led to the influx of calls that came into our warehouse, into our office, and by and large, that seemed to be at least the slowdown and the impediment in terms of the election day, in terms of that. So as a consequence, in terms of working with our county IT and the state, we had a couple of meetings with those individuals as well as the ES&S, is identifying a best, and again, we've actually had meetings last Friday that illuminated even further, was county IT and the Board of Elections is committed to doing on-site connectivity testing in every polling location prior to the June primary. So for Middlesex Borough that's having a special school election, we've already went in and checked that location. It will work for the routers that we have. Again, for these upcoming elections, we have many redundancies in terms of that. We'll be using multiple routers as backups. We'll be using paper poll books as a backup on the location. Again, we're using these opportunities in upcoming elections to be able to test out scenarios in terms of the equipment. So again, that will be done prior to election. The SS is committed to working with us and being able, in terms of how the poll books work with the routers, to ensure that that when they are connected, that they work as quickly as possible. And one of the elements is that in terms of how we would use them, as Commissioner Katz said, ideally you would have, and again, by statute, you would have 4 individuals in a polling location. Usually, for an election, that would be 2 poll books, 1 voting machine in each, and requiring 4 poll workers.
It's not enough.
What's that?
It's not enough.
It's, well, again, for the last election, we had combined districts on poll books. We had, and again, we didn't have the full complement of poll books that we do have now for an election. So again, we would be able to then return to as Commissioner Katz had said, to the 4 poll workers per poll location, 2 electronic
For an election
poll books
district.
per district, and then we would have 1 machine per district as well. And then another item from, at least in terms of that, is in terms of playing that forward best practices. I know I'm going to go on a little bit, but again, I think this is important for the commissioners as well, is that, Commissioner Engel had hit on is in terms of communication. We had encountered in our office, if there was a need for extra poll books, we were programming them in our office, putting them on a car, taking them out to a location. The warehouse was programming machines, taking them out of location because of the delays. So what we are, as a best practice going forward, is we're going to have extra poll books in each of the municipal clerk's offices, stationed for the event that you need additional ones because a printer goes down or something else goes down. So in that regard, we also will have an ESNS technician at each of the municipal clerk's offices for that purpose.
And they'll be able to program it
They'll
for
be
the
able-
particular
yeah.
election, polling location.
Yes.
Wow,
And
one in
so-
each district?
For the district, and then would be able to, again, get it out to the location that much.
No, I'm sorry, one for each municipality, you said, is that correct?
No, multiple for it, and again, multiple poll books as backup for each. What I'm saying is,
But the
Let me-
worker, you said, was gonna,
And let me,
The technical.
Of
let
course.
me, I'm going to see if, but just make sure we understand here. Tom, you're saying that the concept is we're going to have an ESNS employee or affiliate in each of our 25 municipalities.
yes.
And in each of our 25 municipalities, they will have extra,
Poll books
Poll
that are
books.
not assigned at that moment, they're
Right.
just there
and,
in
but
case
they,
they need to be
and the
programmed.
concept with the ESNS employee is that he will be at the program, and so if it has to go out to a particular polling location,
Yes.
it will only take the votes for people in that polling location.
Yes, correct.
all right, so there will be because there will be no extra poll books at the actual voting sites.
Yeah.
They will only be in the municipal building. So if
Again,
somebody
it's a
needs it, they
question
have
of
to
how
many-
contact.
it's
a question of
I
how
just,
many.
because I thought in each site
Well,
there
I
would
mean,
be extra.
if supplies dictate, we might be able to
Okay.
have extras within
Thank you.
the site as well.
Yeah.
The likelihood is, we're talking about, we have 220, 230 polling, a certain number of polling locations. And if we won't have, at least at the present time, I'm assuming we don't have enough extra poll books to put several extra ones above whatever we would normally put as per election district.
And of course, these are electronic ones, we still
Electronic
have,
poll books.
because you had mentioned about paper also being out there, and how are we gonna do that?
Well, that was a different.
Extra paper.
Oh, we would have.
I don't mean paper for, I mean the extra, remember how you used to have to sign in the poll books? We don't have that, right? So I thought you had mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, we would have extra supplies that go along with those poll books.
Paper poll books too?
No, we will have paper, if I can explain, we would have paper poll books as backups for the March 8th and the March 22nd election,
Right.
as well as maybe New Brunswick School Board election. But that's not feasible for a countywide for a primary because of the sheer number of changes you would have to do in that regard. So again, moving forward beyond that, so again, that would be part of what we are adopting as a best practice. We had 10 technicians on site for the general election. We mostly had them in some of the locations, like Monroe, or some of the locations that had high contested elections, just to be able to be on site there. But I think having one in each municipality to troubleshoot, again, we're talking strictly just mechanical or programming issues, that would be a benefit to our election day operation. Just want to make sure I hit that. So that's in terms of the connectivity. In terms of
Can I
the
just ask you a question on
Yeah.
the connectivity, just so, the routers themselves,
Mhm.
who had issued us the routers?
That would,
State of New Jersey. Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
go ahead.
I-
I'm sorry, it's a rhetorical question.
No, it's not rhetorical, but who issued us the routers?
that was through the state.
Right. So the question is, they will continue issuing us the routers, correct? So, and those routers, just because of technology, those routers can change, I guess, somewhat. I mean, it might be, router 1, 2, 3, 4 today, and it might be router 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
The
tomorrow.
physical
with
router.
with improvements. The only thing I'm asking is, just because we test something in a polling place today with other equipment that the state will give us, we can't assume anything that the state gives us. So what I'd like to make sure, just as a double check, that we are checking the equipment that they're giving us.
Yes.
And when it does, that's every election, and don't assume that what they gave us, let's just say the last election, is the same as what they're giving us this election.
No, we have the full complement of routers.
They gave it to us.
in-
We
in
physically
our-
have it. They don't
We
take it
physically
back. They
have
don't
it.
take- They didn't take it back.
They didn't take it
They
back,
gave
we
it
still
to us.
retained
Okay.
it. So we have the routers we use for election day, and then the routers we use for early voting, which are
Right.
more high signal
Right.
router. And so again, county IT, in terms of working with the vendor, is going to test every router prior to elections, and they've already started to do that for the upcoming elections. Regarding the paper provisional ballots, Commissioner, it was covered in I think it was covered in both meetings, but it probably in particular to Commissioner Engel when she attended, was that the county clerk had said that, for the 2021 election, that there were paper provisional ballots that were printed. Those paper provisional ballots were with the warehouse, and again, the process would be is that if there was, again, we were thinking more of a site letdown in terms of poll books, that they would be delivered to that location with the paper poll books. The
We're
clerk
talking about for 22 on?
No, this was for
My
2021.
understanding that for 21, none of that was printed. There was maybe A1, and they had to physically make photocopies to get to get more ballots. There were not, I was told, maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but I was told there were not provisional paper ballots sitting in the warehouse.
There were-
Is that
there were-
correct or not?
Paper provisional ballots for the warehouse, but again, because of the issues from the phone calls in the day, those weren't, again, the sheer number. Those
How
were-
many were there in the
I
warehouse?
I don't know I don't know the number. I don't know if it was per municipality or per district, but the clerk has acknowledged that, and again, moving forward as a best practice, that having paper provisional ballots in each location would be the best practice going forward.
So that we, yeah. 'cause
There
we
will
would-
be,
and
as
we
a
would-
backup to the ballot cards and the provisional process going forward, there will also be the paper provisional ballots on site.
Remember, there was the debate about using that emergency ballot.
That's right, exactly. That's
Some
why we
people
had to
would give
make,
it
we had to
permission,
make
yes,
a
some
decision. We
people
had,
do
right,
not.
exactly. which
So
was not-
if the physical ones are there, and we know that someone can use that provisional, it's certainly
A
much better
paper
than going.
provisional ballot,
Another
which
route.
identifies who the voter is, so that we can check it, so the Board of Elections can check it later,
Right,
is a good thing, and that's an additional, it's additional fail-safe.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
additional fail-safe, and it has to be
So
there.
now provisionals are going to go out with the equipment? Is that what we're doing?
So is there a commitment from the county clerk going forward and every election to have paper provisional, regardless of whether you have the e-poll books, to have sufficient number of paper provisional ballots in each polling location in Middlesex County for every election?
Correct.
And that's the commitment?
That's it.
What's the efficient amount?
And then if we run out of provisional
if the phone
ballots,
calls
which could
work,
happen
you can always
if something
have
happens with the machines, can we have some in the municipal clerk's office in
Well,
each town? So
We
we can run them out to the,
We have to determine what the numbers are,
I
because
mean, you could either do it by sheer number, or you could do it by percentage. You
Yeah.
have 110% printed per district
Yeah.
on site at the location, so you're above and beyond the number
I
of voters
mean,
in that district.
hopefully, going forward, the machines will work sufficiently proper, our e-poll books will work sufficiently properly so that the provisional ballots can be done as they anticipated would be done, which was cards, which was still cards. So the paper provisional ballots is really a backup to that.
to the cards.
So we don't, hopefully, we won't need to use the paper provisional backups because the rest of it will work. But hopefully is not a plan. So
Not
that's
for
why
an
we have
election.
it. Right, that's why we have it. Okay.
And then kind of taking another piece of that would be communication on election day, which is, I think, was probably the other item in terms of communication from polling locations to the board and vice versa, was a challenge. And again, we were stress tested in terms of the number of phone calls were coming into our office, coming into the warehouse, coming into the main office, people calling the warehouse for poll book issues and calling the main office for machine issues. So, and to the Commissioner Katz's point, even during a normal election, communication is a challenge. I mean, it's
In that case, we,
the old process of, we kind of communicate these things through the clerk calls us, or the poll worker just calls the board. And again, as you guys know, half our staff is over, tabulating on a particular day. So the challenge of getting, having people have the idea that we're being responsive is a challenge. So one of the things we've discussed during those county meetings with county IT is coming up with a better process in terms of communication. Now, some of that might be, the idea of master poll workers. It might be idea of hiring seasonals that would then be working with the clerks in kind of a master poll worker scenario. Again, that would be for the commissioners to kind of delve into that. But at least creating a communication platform, almost a call center scenario, so that we create not a funnel or a bottleneck of phone calls coming into our office, but we have people assigned to polling locations or areas within the municipality that are trained, that are been given advanced training, and kind of can triage issues that occur at the site and maybe resolve them before calls need to be made to the board. And if a call needs to be made to the board, then in a call center scenario, they're coming into a dedicated line that then can be given to appropriate staff to be able to answer that phone call or be responsive back to that request. I think the other issue is that there were calls that are coming into our office, and again, because of the sheer number of calls, is that if you were calling, you didn't know whether you were the second person or the 50th person to be calling. And so I think a part of that call center scenario would be able to provide people, where they are in line, how quickly we might be able to respond back to them. And one more point, and then I'll turn it back to the commissioners, was that the county is also committed to, as part of either a master poll worker program, or if you want to call it a master seasonal program, to be able to give them the technology, whether it is dedicated tablets or phones, to be able then to share that information back to us, or call the dedicated line instead of calling the main line and stuff like that. So those are items, and again, in terms of maybe improving the communication, which is always a challenge at the board on election day. So again.
Yeah, my question had been, during that discussion of communication, were you considering having the communication work from here to the poll areas? In other words, if you would have gotten the information at 2 in the morning that this was a problem, you could have let them know so that the problem wouldn't have existed there. Do you understand? So I think it should go both ways. Yes,
Yeah,
we need access to you, but you should be able to.
And I think that would be part of providing tablets that would be able to send out alerts and messages from the board of elections to the people into the field.
If I've got this right now, the e-poll books that we have are supposed to be able to accept messages that we send out from our office to them. But I think we may have disabled that because of the problems with the routers. So the question is, at least in part, is we should see if we can still do that in terms of reminders, et cetera, or we can do that, but that's fixed. And the second part to that is, when we're talking about call centers and such, there is at least one company that has appeared at, I don't know if they put an NJEO or the national things, I think it's Drake. I can find something if you need it. They have it's directly for election stuff, and it's relating to call centers. So if we're talking about doing that, we should at least talk to them and see if that's something that makes sense for us. Not necessarily we should do it, but if we're talking about potentially call centers and stuff, there's a company out there that does that for elections. Okay. If you need a name, I'll have to dig it up from somewhere.
In regards to the call center, I think it's a good idea, a good concept. But if you're going to have an ES and S employee in every location or in every town, I think any technical questions that relate to the machine operating or anything shouldn't even be bothered going into a call center. It should go directly to that ES and S employee that's right there. Instead of sending it to a call center, then finding out somebody else, they can call the ES and S employee directly.
Well, and I think a good point is, again, you have that on staff, but I still think in terms of the communication loop that you want to have, you still want the board to be either made aware, let's say, Helmeta. I'm in Helmeta, I'm the master poll worker, or wherever you want to name them. I'm communicating with the ES&S technician about this issue, so at least we're aware of it and we're not getting something secondhand.
There can be a number of calls that come to our office on election day about where do I vote? Am I registered? A lot of those calls, which are taken up by your staff, may be able to be handled by the automated system. And if you, to the extent that you can get them, to the extent that you can get them taken care of that way, then the calls that actually get to staff can more likely be handled because there's less volume. So.
My only situation with that is being there when polls open at 6 o'clock, there is a massive amount of phone calls where staff is, they're challenged. I mean, everybody's doing a lot of different aspects at that 6 o'clock hour. To say, push number 1 to know where you vote, push number 2, not a bad idea, but these people want to know, they want a human voice. Our staff does, I think, a very good job of trying to get those calls through, but there are times when those calls are just massive. I mean, they do overload the system. So whatever you have, what I've seen, we've all seen, it overloads the system. The staff can't keep up. The same way when Steve gets calls from the polling places, it's that crunch time that we do the best we can as our staff. But honestly, those are the hardest times for us to respond to those people also, because things are going to go wrong, most likely between the 6 and 8 o'clock hour, or possibly go wrong. And once they get up past that time, that hard time, I think we all take a breath saying it's better.
It'll stabilize.
It'll stabilize. So this particular election, when obviously we knew there was more problems than that, and that kept going further. But generally in an election, Steve's staff answers as much as they can because the poll workers, and they start with Steve at 5:30 in the morning because obviously they're there, they have to open up the machines, and so we have to be careful of what the times are and what we're trying to do. But I think we've done a good job. I know everything can be improved, but I think our staff does a great job of doing that. Now, how those pressure points, how do we do that? Maybe we should look into that a little bit more, or a little more help. But that's otherwise, I don't see that all during the day or something.
No, I'm not suggesting that when people call, they just end up with a voicemail help.
Right.
But it is possible if they just say, if you have a problem with where you vote, or a couple of simple things, press that. Otherwise, just hold on, we'll answer, we'll pick up the phone. So you can have 30 seconds or whatever that says. It doesn't matter. Actually, you talk to the people that do this, they may have, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we can at least talk to them and see what's working.
Yeah, that's fine. Make them like it.
And then just kind of to go back to what you were saying, which is an important question that the board, or at least the staff will have to present to the board, is your question in terms of the routers and regarding the public communication. So, in some of the conversations we had with the county and the state is, the question is whether or not we want, when do we want the router on, and what do we want it to do? So do we want it on, you have to have it on at some point to be able to do that initial update.
Because of the early voting that has to
Early
be
voting
downloaded.
and those mail-in ballots that came in.
And my understanding is after that, we turned it off because that was part of the problem, because it slowed down everything.
Yes, so you could either, and again, for one of the reasons why we kept them on, or kept cycling them on, was because we had multiple districts on each of the poll books, which, and again, for that point of view, was to be able to, again, provide ease for our voters to be able to go to any poll book. But if we're returning back to one district, 2 poll books, then you, again, like you said earlier, you can turn off that router at the beginning of the day, and then only the voters for that district can vote at that district table. But you remove that ability to communicate with the poll workers through the chat function.
We have to talk about that. The number of machines and things is necessary. We'll have to discuss as it works whether, we want to the extent that we can, and it doesn't otherwise affect it, we do want to take advantage of the technology. So I remember in the prior machines, you sent me back to Perth Amboy, to one polling place. There were 3 districts there. 2 districts had nobody waiting online, and 1 district had about 50 or 60 people, and we couldn't, because the machines were by district, we couldn't have them vote on the other machines.
Right.
If we can avoid, if in certain instances that's an issue, we want to be able to use the technology to possibly let them vote on other machines there. But we have to figure that one out.
Was poll worker training discussed as well? My thinking is, if I'm watching the machine and you say you have to change this from 6 to 5, I have to know how to do that.
Yeah, I think, and again, I will give kudos to everyone in our office that did poll worker training. I think, I don't know how many poll worker training classes were conducted for over 2,000 people, but it was almost 2 hours of training. which is extensive for poll worker training, and I think everyone did an excellent job.
I agree.
I think if you want to say there were breakdowns, I think it was breakdowns in things that we didn't even know regarding the routers and how they interacted with poll books. And I think that speaks to the fact that we got a lot of this technology a couple of months before the election and didn't have, again, from the state or from the county, the ability to test out all scenarios feasible in terms of how they might operate an election. So I think in terms of poll worker training, the things we talk about is again, not, I wouldn't say we would be, I would just say revamping or changing it holistically, but we would be maybe addressing some things in terms of how the poll workers use the technology. And again, sometimes you only find out about issues in terms of how the poll workers use it on election day, that you didn't even anticipate how they would use it, or the issues that came up from voters about their experience with poll workers using it. So there are a couple of items, and that is an item for the board to kind of review, is in terms of poll worker training for June, whether that would be mandatory, and again, I'll mention another item. The county is committed to providing incentives in terms of poll worker training, in terms of funding for that. Whereas for the previous election, the funding for training that the poll worker took was only for that general 2021 election.
Smaller classes worked out much better. I heard good comments all over the
And
county.
again, kudos to everyone. I think the smaller
Yeah,
classes,
it worked out a lot better.
hands-on training does, does work better than the large,
Yeah,
ones that were done
auditorium
previously.
type.
It takes a lot of effort, obviously, and it takes a lot of hours. And I think with, the lessons learned from the election, that we can come up with a process that, more informs the poll worker. Because again, this is a major change. I mean, it's new machines, new poll books, new processes. And again, someone brought up to me, for Woodbridge and Edison, it would be 7 straight elections that they would have had to been trained for poll worker training because of all the changes from, provisionals to ballots being accepted, the mail-in ballots, and so on and so forth. So it has been a lot of training and a lot of changes, but I think if we can get past this June election and, settle on a process that can, take us into November, then I think we've accomplished what we've done. We wouldn't need any more, I wouldn't say you never need any more training, but we wouldn't be coming back to you for November unless there was a change by the legislature saying we need to do additional training.
Tom, do you have anything else
I
on your
think
list?
training-
We need to move along.
Yeah, I mean, I
Can I
really
just ask one
like.
question on the poll worker? Just one question. Maybe this is a Valerie. Valerie, can you determine at all if we are getting younger in our poll workers? Just my own impression, I don't know, it appeared we were getting, maybe because of the pay, maybe because that we were getting some more people applying, different, younger people, things like that, versus some of our older poll workers that may have issues. Is there any way of doing just an analysis for us and let us know if that's happening? And maybe some of I know we've been reaching out, all of us, and all the parties been reaching out just to be younger with these people. I think that helps, and they're not discriminating.
More computers.
It's more computers, right, exactly. So just would like to know if there's any way, you could do that,
Yeah,
that'd
I'll
be great.
speak with the coordinators and
Okay.
find out if.
Good, thank you.
All right.
Just one last.
Go ahead.
Because you had mentioned that training was not going to be a focus for you and us perhaps, but I believe the training should be consistent, should be yearly, older or younger. There are gaps in our memory often that we need to refresh, and it's not a bad idea to have some. They may be shorter because you're not introducing anything new, and had we had any more, we still wouldn't have been able to fix the problem that happened in our last general election, I agree. But I would stress training as opposed to trying to eliminate it because we don't have anything new.
I'm just saying that whatever training we would come up for the primary with all the, if you want to say smoothing out the difficulties, wouldn't then require mandatory training for the fall.
Yeah, in Title 9, if I may, Title 19 requires training every 2 years to be paid the full amount. So that's has been our general cycle, except when we had new stuff. And we've had new stuff, thanks to the state, every year. So,
No, you can't.
Just wanted to put my comment into the minutes, thank
Do
you.
you have anything else on your list?
No,
No? All right, I'm going to skip ahead to,
I just need to-
We do have a polling change request here.
oh, we do?
Yes.
Oh. Do you want these polling change requests done today?
Yes, if you want.
Did everybody get the polling change request?
I have issues over there. We have to discuss that.
All right, bring it up now, okay?
Polling place. Polling place location changes.
All right, Denellen is the first one.
I actually left one off. I left Carteret. Districts 3 and 4 want to go back to the housing authority, which they used pre-COVID. So it was an existing polling location.
Okay, I'm going to ask to start with on all of these things, whether the party chairs in each town have been asked about this and what their views were. Because I know that in Spotswood, that did not happen with the Republican Party chair, and I have suggestions as to where things should go in Spotswood. And personally, I looked at Milltown. Maybe they were consulted, but I've been in both. Milltown presently has 2 polling locations. It's a school and a senior center, and about half of the districts are in one and half of the districts are the other. The senior center, I don't think it can go. Maybe it's certainly handicap accessible.
We've
know that.
inspected it.
You can
They're
put
going-
8 people.
They're
You think
going
you can
to
put 8
empty the
polling
whole
locations?
building out for us, Don.
Excuse me?
They're gonna empty the whole building out for us, is what I was
It was
told.
empty before. I don't think.
No, there was couches and different things, they're all gone. They're gonna move everything.
Okay. I'm not, in terms of that, I have 2 problems. One, parking for 8 districts versus 4 districts. 2, there's a law that part of Title 19 provides that if you have a polling, you can have a polling location more than 2,000 feet from the edge of the district, except if you have some reason for it or you get approval or whatever it is. And I drove, to get here, I drove down Main Street, Milltown, and I can tell you, and I checked it on purpose, the distance between these 2 polling locations is like at least a half a mile.
It's a quarter mile is what I was told by the clerk.
It's not, I drove by, I specifically.
Look,
I know,
I'm not arguing.
I'm not arguing, no, they may have told you that, but I can tell you, because I know where they
The town
were.
is a mile long, period. And the only thing we have to answer for as a board, when it comes to polling places, is it within a mile of the actual district? And yes, it
It's
is.
2,000 feet,
What's that?
2,000 feet, not a mile.
That's not the waiver we have to sign. The waiver we have to sign when it comes to polling places every year is a mile, if you're outside a mile.
I have a copy of Title 19 here, I'm not necessarily going to find it.
I understand.
But I'm
I'm
also.
just telling you what it is.
Right, but I'm also, in general, not in favor of making it more difficult for voters to vote. And by eliminating the polling place at one end of town, they're not at the end of town. Milltown is a smaller town, clearly, but they are a half a mile apart. So if we put them all in one place, the people that went to one place are at least, even if they live next to the school, are going to have to go at least another half a mile, which may work, may not. But I don't see why we should eliminate the second polling place in Milltown in general because of how it's set up and for the different reasons, for the parking, for the convenience of the voters, et cetera. And in each of instance, I do need to know before I would vote on anything if the party chairs, both Democrat and Republican chairs, have been consulted and if we have a response. Do we have that for these?
I do not have that information.
So we don't have that for any of them?
No, I did not know.
Okay, then I'm not going to vote
Party
for any,
chairs.
I'm not going to vote on any of them unless we have that feedback. We only got this, as you know, yesterday afternoon for a morning meeting. So we couldn't look at anything yet.
Do you have anything in writing requesting these changes? Because we don't call up and say we're changing it. We hear from the borough clerk or the mayor perhaps. So
So Commissioner, would you want Valerie to maybe reach out
Well, I wanted
to
the
the clerks
public
and
to
ask
know.
for make sure that both party chairs are made aware.
More than made aware, to see if they have any comments, whether they have any problems with the changes.
And then we can share that with you post this
Yeah.
meeting, and you guys can make it.
But I will tell you, as I said, I have suggestions, and because Spotswood things were eliminated, they're certainly happy to go, they're certainly happy to have the polling places put back, but at least I think one of them in Spotswood, I'm told, is we're talking about the Polish American Club. That would be like 3 districts in there, and I'm told that the Polish American Club is concerned about parking, and they don't think it's good to have 3 districts there. So there's another
2
suggestion.
districts, 2 and 5.
2 added to that, or maybe,
The
think
Polish
there's one there
American Club
already.
has never been used as a
okay,
poll.
well then they want 1. I don't know what it is. I'll give you an email that I got a suggestion. That's what's otherwise suggested. But between 4 or 5 o'clock yesterday and this morning, there's a limited thing. So we need the feedback from the party chairs.
Okay.
If there's no, if both party chairs are happy in terms of that, in most instances, none of us, I don't know, I mean, I've been to some of these things, but I don't know whether that's best or not.
Exactly.
Some of them I do, because I've been to these places.
But I'm saying that the request came to you, you didn't say this is an arbitrary change.
No, and it says on here if it was from the clerk, the mayor, the business administrator.
Correct,
Yeah.
thank you, and they're not going to make those decisions arbitrarily either. I understand the specifics that you want from the party chairs to keep it apolitical, and perhaps they will, I can't imagine them not having that information as well.
We've always reached out to the party chairs in the past. How come we didn't do it this time?
I
Some of
just
these-
was handed this job and I did not realize that I
Okay.
needed to.
Valerie, correct me if I'm wrong here, our position in terms of proposed changes in polling locations was that the party chairs do not have a veto in any way, shape, or form, but before the board votes on it, we get the responses and the opinions of the respective party chairs, so we have somebody else that's on the scene, so that we can look at it before we approve it.
And our
Our
staff.
staff, of course.
Right.
If it's
So
not,
let me-
if it doesn't meet our basic requirements, it doesn't matter.
Right, so if I may, how time sensitive is this? Meaning,
When did you get,
no, when do the commissioners have to vote on this as an absolute, let's say, drop dead date to make sure that we are,
early vote?
End of the month, that's.
Yeah, it's
okay,
the end
so
of March.
so, if I may,
We can do it by
if you do it by email, is that okay with everybody, correct? If we're
Conference
okay with
call.
that, or a conference call, is that okay? So we can do that, so we can give you the proper?
As long as there's not other issues involved. Yes,
Right,
we
just
can
a-
do it
right,
if it's
just a-
possible, if
right.
it's possible, if we're all happy with
Right.
what the changes are, I have no problem doing it by email.
just wanna make sure.
However, if there are other issues that may
Yeah.
not be able to be
Valerie,
accomplished.
reach out
Okay.
to the clerk to reach out to the
Right.
chairs, or we'll make.
Fine, that'd be fine.
And then respond back to all the commissioners.
That would be fine.
So we'll table that till later.
Of course.
Okay. That's it. And the NJAEO conference, Tom, what's that about?
Again, it was just the Commissioner Frank was again, just as a reminder, and it was particular for new commissioners in terms of the conference, whether or not you wanted
I
to.
can't hear you, Tom.
I'm sorry. In terms of the New Jersey Association of Election Officials, whether or not they're having their conference, I forwarded that email, and it was just really, I think, Commissioner Frankel, or maybe it was Commissioner Katz, to just wanted to mention it, see if people were.
I'll tell you in a minute. I think it's
April
April
11th
11th
to
to 13th,
13th, right.
Monday through Wednesday?
Yeah.
And where is it?
Atlantic City.
Suffolk County.
You need to know if we're going, is that it?
No, it was just mentioned as.
important.
If you haven't, especially if you haven't been to
Right.
this before, I would recommend it for several reasons. One, you get to meet other election
Right.
officials from other counties. You see how you talk to them about how they handle it. There are any number of vendors there. I don't know if the Drake that you mentioned is there. I know they come to the national. I don't remember if they come to the state ones. So there's a lot of
Drake
stuff
is
you can do.
a committee,
Hmm?
he's a committee man, isn't it? Being funny.
No,
I'm
this
being
is,
funny.
it doesn't matter, I got it.
Is the fee for this inclusive of your hotel room, or, there's separate, is there a separate fee if I was only gonna go to one day or another, and not require any.
It's one registration
Yeah.
fee,
For
and if you
everyone.
want to stay one night, that's fine, or it's up to you. You don't stay 2 nights.
The county in the past has paid for the registration and whatever is necessary in terms of hotels, in terms of that.
But going into the convention could be free.
No.
No, there's a registration. You need to know if you're going to go.
All right.
All right, now we're going to skip the executive session and do it later, and now we're going to have public comment. The public has been waiting for quite a while, and some have left. You'll have 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, and you give your name and the town you're from.
My name is Joseph Schmidt. I'm from East Brunswick. I'm coming forward, so I'm kind of dressed to work closer with that. Also, my facial tics have Tourette syndrome. I apologize. Just wanted to say about general use of computers and stuff about it. I come from a family where my father was a programmer who dealt with vacuum tube computers back in the 60s. I'm one of the few people in my generation whose parents know more about computers than I do. But I know something about computers from growing up with that, and my brother's into computers and various things. There were a lot of problems with computers, and there's a concept in computing in programmers that any error with a computer is human error. Because computer literally just does exactly what it's told. The processor is just doing mathematics calculations, and sometimes peripherals will convert it to like something a screen or something like that. And so the question is, when there's a problem with the computer, where is the problem? Is it, let's say, the hardware? Is there a design flaw? Is there a mistake? Is it a programming mistake? Human error? It could be a whole bunch of possibilities. But there are a whole bunch of problems with computers, and that's something which is it's human error at some place, because computers do exactly what they're told. Nowadays they have neural net systems which are, as far as I know, they don't write their own programs either. They're just about recognition factors. But it's a basic database system of computers, so it doesn't really need any neural net systems in it at all anyway. So it would be just old-fashioned calculations going on and storage of information. But another thing I wonder is maybe it's better, since they had so much problems at the beginning, because connecting to the internet apparently is what they had. That's when I'm in District 9, where I went to go and vote, they told me that more than there were long lines because they couldn't connect to the internet for the booklet with all the signatures on the tablet. So does it really need to be connected to the internet? I mean, computers have been around for years without internet, and I've heard that years ago when the internet first came out, the FBI specifically had a separate computer data system that was separate from the internet because they didn't want to have any possibility of between that physical connection. You had to take a disk between the two systems to actually do something. Now they don't have floppy disks, you have thumb drives. But instead of going and, I understand the internet is sometimes easier to use, but there are many problems that happen with the internet. Maybe just take a thumb drive, the more now, like you used to have to deal with the books. Just take a thumb drive and put it in, and just like you used to have to go and update computer programs with it before you had internet, you could actually take a floppy disk or a thumb drive or DVD-ROM or something, put it in, and it would go and update the program. The internet makes it easier to do that, but maybe for security and for the possibility of lessening problems, maybe better to just not have internet access at all and just have it completely separate and have things go back and forth with thumb drives or some sort of diskette. Well, they don't discuss it. That's what I'm thinking. Also wanted to mention that a friend of mine in Highland Park had mentioned that when they went to vote, they had pressed Chitterelli's name on the machine, and it didn't. It wasn't selected the first couple of times he did. It took a couple times before it was selected. I don't know why that would happen. There are rumors about it happening other places, but I actually know someone in Highland Park who said it happened to her. So something to look into of why.
Interesting. But she knew immediately that it was not accepted.
There's a
Didn't light up.
yeah.
Didn't light up.
Well, a lot
Yeah.
of people don't even pay, you just
Yeah.
vote,
That's
so.
true. I paid attention. I actually took a picture of it when I was down in
Okay.
reports about it, but some other people too, just in case. But,
Thank you.
all right, thank you very much for listening.
Anybody else?
Rick Boren, Budget. My first time poll worker, yes. What's that?
Don't touch me.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Yes, the computers went down. I worked at the Campbell School, and it was backed up. It took 1 hour to get through. One of the problems was that there were a lot of older people and handicapped people that couldn't stand online, so we had to provide chairs for them. We were short on the polling machines, because in those two districts, 12 and 13, because of the increased construction, they installed a couple of a lot of big apartment buildings, so that increased the population of the district. That should be taken into consideration. We didn't get an extra polling machine until the afternoon. And the other question that I have, how many people are allowed in the polling booth? One?
One.
I mean, I had,
Do you object to me answering that? Can I answer that?
We
The
all
law
said one.
provides that the voter can go into the polling booth.
I had,
Wait, let me finish. If you ask the question,
Yes.
I'll finish the question. The law provides that the voter goes into the polling booth. The Attorney General has otherwise allowed that if they bring a child with them, they are allowed to bring the child in with the polling booth. If a voter needs assistance, there is a paperwork that has to be signed before they go in, signed by the voter and by the assistant. And the voter can choose any person of their choice except, I think it's their union representative or their employer. That part doesn't happen. So they can choose any person of their choice, but the paperwork has to be filled out. If they do not have someone of their choice that they bring in, and they need assistance, then one Republican and one Democrat poll clerk are supposed to go in with them. In no instance should one poll clerk of either party go in with the voter. Because that's what the law
There
provides.
could be a maximum of, could be the most three is the maximum.
well, I had a woman and her parents go into the booth together.
Women and both parents?
Yes.
Well, it's really supposed to be one per, if they can take one person, but it still should be signed. The
Right.
paperwork should be signed. Anytime someone else goes in with them, there should be a record and it should be signed to reflect that that's happened.
Okay.
It
well-
should not be, the way you described it, no, it shouldn't be both parents.
Okay. All right, so, you're aware of the problems and try to get that straightened out. Okay.
Is that ever,
Anybody
that
else?
should be included in poll worker training is what was mentioned.
It's in the blue book.
It is,
It's in the blue book that is provided
I-
on election day.
But it should be, these little things.
Would
should be
anyone
in
else
there.
like to speak?
We talk about it.
Charlie?
We talk about it.
Good afternoon, once again, Charles Cradaville. Can I get some answers on the 2020 irregularities? I know I've come to this board before after the situation in New Brunswick, and I asked, has this ever happened before where an entire voting machine worth of votes has been forgotten for a week? That's what happened in the April 2021 New Brunswick School Board election. I was told that that was the first time that had ever happened, to folks' knowledge here. But this email seems to suggest that the same thing happened and it took even longer than a week to get the correct results. Can anybody enlighten me as to this situation?
Going to answer it?
Which email?
The one I just
Are you
gave.
talking about the ward thing?
November 23, 2020, I know Mr. Katz, you raised concerns about the South River totals.
Yes.
November 2020, and then I have here an email from Mr. Lynch, says not all sticks read on election night.
Yes.
Poll workers left sticks in the machine. When was this caught?
So again, that was, if I remember correctly, that was during 2020, which was predominantly a mail-in ballot election. So during that time, we did have voting machines that were set up in each of the polling locations for ADA voters, disabled voters as it were. And I believe that was one of the first times we had used the SNS machines without regional reporting, because again, the number of votes, again, we hadn't done the training or had the implementation, or even the T1 line to be able to transmit the results, so we were doing that in a manual process. So what I believe happened at that time was that the results sticks and results tapes were not delivered back to the board that night to be read, that they were put in with the election election supplies,
I think so.
which then, before the certification and election, our staff had went through and located that. And so again, in that chain, it was simply a poll worker clerk error that the sticks had not come back to the board. So again, off of Mr. Cradaville's point in terms of Brunswick, is that was again during the manual process of loading the sticks into election, that since we've gone to the regional reporting where we have the clerks receive the sticks, upload the election results from those sticks to the board and then ultimately to the clerk and then to the website, that the board is able to then track all the sticks that are in the field. Because again, they're numbered and we have them in a spreadsheet to be able to see in real time when they're being loaded. And then we're able to see if sticks have not been read, which, and again, the last election, people leave sticks in the machines. We're able to identify those sticks and call the clerk and have those sticks ultimately be read that night. So that was part of the process of transitioning from a manual stick process to the regional reporting that the clerks do at that level. So again, it was unfortunately it was a couple of votes in South River for ADA voters that wasn't counted until before the certification of the election.
Which is good that it was caught, don't you think? That nobody was
Sure.
ended and no signatures occurred until, because there was an error and it was acknowledged and dealt with.
Seems like you should always know how many sticks there are, and if you don't get them all back, it should be caught right away, but that's not what happened, unfortunately, this time. So it took over a week, I believe. For the school election in April in New Brunswick, how many polling locations will they be open, and can we get a pledge that there's not going to be any more extrajudicial closures of polling locations without this board signing off?
Yeah, I mean, they still have to be inspected, so we don't want to have to commit to it. But I think in terms of offered, I think the only one is the one that the Providence Square that
Providence Square is the only one.
Providence Square is the only one that did not that does not want to be a polling location.
In other words,
the
all
others-
the, just to clarify this, our explanation as well, every regular New Brunswick polling place has agreed to be open for the school board election, subject to our inspection of it, except for Providence Square.
Providence Square, which is not a
Right, and our inspection is ADA, but there's been other changes to it, like the room that we normally use is now
Outlets,
full of storage, we can't
spacing.
use it.
Outlets.
I will take care of all that. Yeah,
Okay.
Have that done.
Outlets.
So just respectfully, that does leave a hole in the Fifth Ward, and I would suggest that somebody reach out to the Hungarian American Athletic Association. That's right across from Providence Square and could conceivably meet that need and restore us back to our 12 polling locations.
might be a different. But Mr.
Disappointed.
Mr. Carter, can
Yes.
you just clarify? There's a Hungarian Heritage.
Hungarian Heritage Center is 300 Somerset. This is different. This
Oh,
is
What's the name of it?
Hungarian American Athletic Association, I believe, or club, I'm sorry.
Hack is on,
Hack,
that's
yeah.
still on Somerset.
It is on Somerset, right
Near
over.
that's right near the hospital.
Exactly, yes.
And
So
isn't
right near
Providence,
the-
is Providence Square is a condominium association, isn't that in the outer
Rental
edge
apartments,
of
it's on the
town?
same, it's literally across from the Hack.
It
on
is?
Harvey Street. The Hack moved in 10 years
Okay,
ago.
so I know the old location then, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah. So I'm disappointed the county clerk has not sent a representative. Is it true that Ms. Braga is leaving?
That would be for them to answer, that's the county clerk's office.
Okay, I noticed they posted the job for election supervisor. So I'm very concerned about the situation there. Also, ES&S
Your time is up.
not showing up here.
You can come, does anybody else want to speak? No? You can come back then.
Oh, thank you.
3 minutes.
So, yeah, disappointed that ES&S and Remington Vernick are not here. I do want to get some answers on the rewarding process. Mr. Frankel, why didn't you admit to being the driving force behind the Piscataway map? Madam Chair, through you for Mr. Frankel, could you tell us why he was not upfront when Mr. Tarver's asked him about it?
Mr. Cradwell, I make deliberations, strategic deliberations, as do all of the commissioners up here. I use what I do, that's my deliberations.
Okay, you submitted some maps to Remington Vernick.
That's my answer, thank you.
Okay,
That's it.
yeah,
Thank you. That's it.
you
That is
submitted
it.
some maps to Remington Vernick for their consideration of your desired wards for Piscataway. These maps had a number of addresses pinpointed on them. Can you tell us the significance of those pinpoints on your maps that
No,
you
sir.
submitted?
No, sir.
You can't, you don't know what those,
Didn't say that, sir.
so perhaps you do know, but you don't want to share with us what the pinpoints represented?
Mr. Cradwell, the maps were submitted to Remington and Vernon. That's my deliberation. That's my job as a commissioner, and that's what I did.
Is it true that
That's what I did, sir.
is it true that the pinpoints were
Sir, that's what I did.
enemies of
Sir,
the political
Sir, that's what I
establishment
did.
that you were taking
Sir,
into consideration
That's
when
my
you were
answer.
drawing your
Thank you.
desired
That
board?
is my answer. Thank you.
Okay. With all due respect, your answers are not sufficient.
With all
You've
due
been
respect, it's
deceptive.
not sufficient to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You've been deceptive and you haven't been
No, sir.
forthcoming about this.
No, sir.
Can you tell us which other towns did you
Sir.
submit maps for?
Sir, all of us as commissioners, you know the process, okay, can submit information, and we can, and we do.
You did so for Piscataway,
We
did you do so
can,
for other towns?
and we do, sir, okay? And all the maps on a bipartisan basis were approved. Okay, in fact, 4 of the towns were approved unanimously, and you know that, correct? Do you understand that, sir?
I believe you're
Do you
correct on-
understand that,
I
sir?
believe you're correct on that.
Okay, so if you
What I'm
understand
asking is
that,
about
if
the
you
source of
understand
the
that,
maps.
if
You
you
submitted one
understand
map
that,
for
sir,
Piscataway.
if you understand that, that's fine. That's what's done. All of the commissioners have the right to submit information. All of the commissioners talked everything about to the public, and took all the public information, and they,
The information was not
we
available
had,
to the
we
public
had,
until I
we
fought
had
for it to be
public,
released, and
sir,
it was
we
released
had
after you'd made your
public,
decision.
sir, we had public comment.
But
We
comment
had
without access
public
to any of the
comment.
plans.
You were also here, other members of the public were here, we had it, we took that in, and we also, as commissioners, have the right to do comment that we desire. Okay, that's it.
Yeah. How's the public supposed
And
to
your time
give-
is up,
how's the
sir,
public
and your
supposed to give
time is
input?
up, sir.
I hope other commissioners are not finding this acceptable. This is not transparent. He hasn't even told us which other towns he drew the map for. And I do believe that enemies of the political establishment were targeted in that map. There were pinpoints on it. I'll present it to the commissioners at a future date. Thank you.
I do want to correct the record on one part here. Most of the votes on the rewarding were done on the Thursday and Friday. My wife died on Thursday, and we buried her on Friday. So the only vote that I was on during those 2 days was at the end of the day on Friday in Oakridge. How I would have voted is maybe a different thing, but you can say of the commissioners that voted, it was
I should say, of the,
No, it wasn't.
I should say, I was trying to,
Okay, yeah, that's
of the
fine.
commissioners who voted, 4 of the towns were unanimous.
Right,
And
one was not.
I amend that, I
Yeah.
apologize.
No problem, it's not a problem, I
I
just want to,
apologize.
I just want to reflect the difference.
And Woodbridge, sir, Woodbridge map as well.
Yeah, well, that was done before,
Yeah,
before
right.
Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further commissioner comments before we adjourn?
We have to go into executive
Yeah.
before that, but before that, I just want to, Don, I mean, not because it's in the public, but this is something else from everybody, just for you personally, that is also what we talked about. And I just want you to have it from all of us, and we just, as a token from us, okay?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we just want to make sure you have it. Okay, thank you.
I guess did we do the commissioner comments?
She just asked
Are there
for it.
any?
Okay, the only comment I have is, and it's more of the personal, obviously, I mean, I thank everyone for their condolences, for the representation and the thing in Sue's name, and it's greatly appreciated. People have heard this before, but my world has been turned upside down, and I'm doing the best I can, and I want you to know if I haven't directly responded on something, just be understanding. So, and that's it. And if you don't know, I mean, Sue was a commissioner of the Board of Elections for 4 years, and I acted as a spouse at the conferences. So,
You were the first gentleman.
yeah.
Not very, not very
when we-
easily, I'm
When
sure.
we went to the national conferences, I attended all the election sections, probably more than a number of the commissioners did at that point. So, thank you very much. That's all I want to say.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session.
Make a motion, we go into executive session?
Second? Second.
Roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Moskowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Bundes, yes.
Pardon me, for the record, what's the reason for the executive session?
Personnel.
Personnel.
Will there be action taken afterwards?
We don't know. We don't think so.
Okay.